we were talking about the record types. All right. So basically, record types allow you to put two different types of records in the same object. When I'm talking about two different types, I mean records which need different fields, right? So these kind of records can be saved in the same object as different record types. So basically what a record type does is it allows two different UIs for the end users. So we just were discussing of an example. Let me just go back to the So we are talking about an example of client projects and internal projects. So in the internal project, I need a field called department, but this department field is not required when it's a client project. The same way in client project, I have a field called client, but this client field is not required for internal project. So this way there can be more fields like this, like I don't need an hourly rate for the internal project. That is right. So now to deal with these types of records, what I'm going to do, we will create two different page layouts. Okay, one page layout will have all the fields which are relevant to client project. One page layout will have all the fields which are relevant to the internal project. Now what we'll do, we will enable the page layout on the record types. So when the end user tries to create a record, he'll have to choose the record type, and the moment he chooses the record type, he will get to see the page layout which is relevant to the record type that he has chosen. That's it. All right. So if someone selects internal project, he gets to see the department field, but when someone selects a client project, it doesn't get to see the department field. Correct? So that's how it works. Okay. So let's create this record types in the Salesforce. Give me a moment. Let me log in. Yep, here we are. Okay. So let's create two different record types for the projects. All that you need to do is you just need to go to the setup, create objects first. Okay. Now let me go to the project object. So I've got a field called hourly rate. Okay, I'll create one more field called department, which can be a text field. Save. Okay, fine. So now let us create the page layouts. All right. So I told you that I am going to create two page layouts. One which will have all the fields for client project and one which will have all the fields for internal project. So just scroll down. We know how to create page layouts. Let me create 2 new page layouts. Okay, just call it client project layout. Save. Okay, so on this page layout, you will, this is client project layout, so here we will not show the department field. So let me remove the department. Okay, other things will be shown. And then save the layout. I'm going to create one more page layout. Internal project layout. In this layout, we don't want to show the hourly rate and budget. Okay, department is important, it will be shown here. All right. Okay, so the fields which are relevant to the client project, yeah, this is internal project, right? Okay, the fields which are relevant to the internal project, I'm showing them here, and the ones which were relevant to the client project, I've shown them on that client project layout. Saved. Now I have got 2 page layouts. All that I need to do is I need to create 2 different record types and assign the correct page layouts to the record types. How are we going to do that? Now scroll down a little further, you will see record types. Okay, currently there are no record types. Okay, which means all the records are same at this point of time. By default there are no record types. You have to create your record types. You can click on new and then create a record type. Record type can be client project. Okay, you have to make sure this is active. Enable it for all the profiles, or enable it for the profiles who need access to this kind of a record type, and then just go ahead and click on save. Go to next. Okay, now this is where you have to select which page layout you are going to apply for this record type. So this is client project, so client project layout will be applicable on this. All right, save. So the record type is ready. Now I'm going to create another record type. Go to objects, create the second record type. Objects, project object. Click on new. Internal project. Record type, make it active, enable for profiles. Click on next. Okay, which page layout? Internal project layout. Save. Okay, So now this is done. So I have got 2 record types created and 2 page layouts assigned to the record types. Now if you try to create a new project, see, before you can actually create a project record, you will be asked to choose a record type. Okay, select a record type. Do you want to create a client project or internal project? Select that. If you say internal project and click on continue, it's going to take you to that page layout, the one that you created for internal project. See, it has got department. If you choose client project and click on continue, then you see, you don't see department, but you see hourly rate, budget, client, these fields. Got it? So the ones that you have shown are then displayed there. Okay, so that's how record types help you save different types of records in the same object. Now this record type is will be required only if you have records which need different fields, right? If they do not require different fields, then you don't need a record type. Then we can just have a pick list, right? Let's say for internal projects and client projects, I just want to have a field which can tell me whether that's an internal project or client project, but field wise they are same. The same fields need to be filled for client projects and internal projects. Then I could just have a pick list saying that project type, and in that pick list I can have internal or client. That's it, right? Only if you feel that the fields are different set of fields will be required for the data, different records, then only use record types, right? Otherwise a pick list will do. All right, okay. So that's about record types. Now the next thing that we are going to discuss is about business logics, putting business logics in the app. Okay, so there are several ways of putting business logics in the app. You can put logic with the help of program, or you can put the logics with the help of drag and drop options. So today we are going to discuss about drag and drop, and with the help of programming or with the help of coding is something that we will discuss during the development sessions. All right, so there are 3 ways to put business logics using drag and drop. One is a validation rule, one is a workflow rule, one is an approval process. So there are these 3 things which we are going to discuss under business logics. Validation rule, workflow rule, approval process. So we'll go one by one. Validation rule is basically the rule to validate data, as the name says, validation rule, right? So it validates data before the data gets into the database. If it's a new record getting created or an existing record getting updated, before the value is saved to the database, you can try to validate the data. So you can define a rule for that. Okay, let's say your hourly rate for the project cannot be more than $100. Okay, so you can actually put a validation rule there, so that if at any point of time someone has entered an hourly rate which is more than $100, it throws an error and says, let's see, hourly rate cannot be more than $100. Okay, so that's validation rule. So let me just go and put this validation rule. project hourly rate will not be more than $100. Okay. So this validation rule is basically used for used to help you avoid or skip the errors. All right. So if the end user by mistake has entered a value, you can actually cross check that with the validation rule, throwing an error. The end user will have an option to go back and check the value one more time and then correct it. Got it? So let's just go ahead and create this. So project, I say hourly rate cannot be more than $100. So now you can define the validation rule by going into this object, go to create objects, go to the project object, and under these fields you will find validation rules. If you go to the object, you will find validation rules here. Okay. If you want to create a validation on a standard object, then you can go to customize, go to that particular standard object. I'm sorry. Let's say if you want to create it under accounts, then you can go to customize, go to accounts, and then go to validation rules here. Okay. And you will be able to define the validation rules that way. Okay. So I'm gonna do it on the custom object. So I'll go to validation rules, click on new, put a name for the validation rule, which can be anything, ABCD, whatever you want. Max hourly rate. Click on insert field. So what is okay? And the validation rule, what you have to define? You have to define two things. What is the error condition? Okay, so you have to write what criteria should throw an error. So what criteria should throw an error? Hourly rate greater than 100, right? This is what should throw error. So write that error condition here. Check syntax. Okay, any fields that you want to refer, you can actually take those fields using this insert field option, just the way we did for formulas. Okay, and then you can put the error message here. So in case this condition has occurred, then what is the error message that you want to throw? So error message can be written here. It can be, take this one only. Okay. Where do you want to display the error message? You want to show it on the top of the page, or do you want to display it beside the field, beside hourly rate field? So it depends on you. Where do you want to show it? I'll show it on the top of the page. Click on save. You have to make sure your validation rule is active. While you're defining the validation rule, there is this active option. So anytime you're defining a validation rule and you want the rule to be active, you have to make sure that this is selected. Sometimes you don't want your validation rule to work. Let's say there's a rule defined, but now for next few days you don't want the validation rules to work due to some reason, some special projects are coming or something like that. You can deactivate this validation rule at that point of time. Then it is not going to work. All right. So you have to keep it active. If you want this to work, click on save. Yep. Now let me just go ahead and create a project and see if it allows me to create a project with hourly rate more than $100. See, project hourly rate cannot be more than $100. Got it? So that's how simple it is. That's how simple this validation rule is. All right. Now you can have more, complex scenarios for validation rules, like uh, okay. Now instead of this, if I have a slightly different requirement, if I say that no, if it's an IT project, it should not be more than $200. If it's a non-IT project, it should not be more than $100. Right? Then you can write that logic there. I'll have to just change the logic. So my logic is that if it's an IT project and hourly rate is more than $200, then it should throw error, right? So write an AND logic here. Type check syntax if it's fine. Yeah. So it will check if project type is IT and hourly rate is more than $200, then it's going to throw error. Okay. Now you can save this. Trying to create a project. IT 130. Try to save. It saves, which means the validation rule did not work. So what's wrong with our validation rule? Oh, hourly rate more than 200, sorry. Yeah, didn't save. Throws an error. Alright. So this is how it works. So this validation rule, as I told you, it actually is used for avoiding some common errors that the person who is trying to enter the data can make, and just to make sure that the incorrect data is not getting into the system, you can define some validation rules, but any point of time we do not overdo the validation rules, and that's just for your understanding. Like, it's okay to put validation rules, but if you try to put too many validation rules, then again the life of the end user becomes very difficult. We can actually put too many rules and ensure that every piece of data getting into the system is checked and validated. But that is what will happen. The end user will not have a very good experience because he will encounter too many errors. So for that reason, some certain things are just allowed. So we don't try to put validation rule on everything. Okay, this is definitely has got nothing to do with how validation rule is defined. This is just for your understanding of it, because ultimate objective of any app is the user friendliness, right? It is not user friendly anyhow, end users are not going to use it, all right? And if they're not going to use the app or whatever software that you have developed, then there is no point actually of putting so much time and effort into developing that. So that is the thing. For validation rule, though we can do a lot of things, but only where it is relevant, or where you feel that no, this is a common area where the end user can make mistake. There we are going to define validation rule. All right. Okay. So validation rule basically is for validating the data before it gets into the database. Now comes the workflow rule. Now workflow rule is used for automating. Okay, so it's not for validating, it's basically for automating actions. Okay, what all actions can we automate using workflow rules? You can send an email alert. You can you can send an email alert. Then you can send you can assign a task to a user. Then you can update a field, and you can send an outbound message. So these are the 4 different actions which can be automated using a workflow rule. All right. Let's say you have a requirement that every time there is a project created with an hourly rate of more than $50, you want to send an email to some person saying that there's a project and this needs to be looked in immediately. Let's say, right? So that email thing can be automated. The project is created, you can define the criteria that okay, if there is a project created with this criteria, automatically send an email to this person. So this can be automated. The same way, these things can also be automated. Instead of sending email, you can assign a task to someone in Salesforce. You can update a field, or you can send an outbound message. Sending an outbound message is basically sending the data to an external application. Okay. So if you want, you can actually do that. So we will start talking about this. So let's take this simple example. If project created with hourly rate greater than 50, send an email to owner of the project. Okay, let's say that's the requirement that I have. Now I can do this manually. Every time the project is created, someone can sit and check if the hourly rate is more than 50 or not, then manually send an email. But if you try to send it manually, there are two problems. First problem is that it's going to take too much of time. Second problem is that there will be a lot of scope of error. Scope of error as in there are chances that you miss out on this and you do not send the email, right? So anyone who is manually doing it might miss out on these kind of important emails, and this is something which happens a lot of times. Customers, when they these support team executives, when they close the case, they forget to send an email back to the customer. Okay, or a new opportunity is created, an email which was supposed to be sent to the opportunity team or the opportunity owner, that is not sent, right? So just to make sure that these important emails or any updates that have to happen on the record, they are not missed out, we can use workflow rule. All right, so if projects created with early rate more than 50, then send an email to the project owner. That's my requirement. That's what I want to automate. Okay, so we just need to define a workflow rule for this. Okay, now before I define a workflow rule for this, I am just going to tell you the basic structure of a workflow rule, what all you have to define inside that. So for initial few days, you guys can use this basic structure, which in later on you will not require, but just for your understanding initially. So what all things we need to define in a workflow rule? First thing that we have to define in a workflow rule is an object. Which object are we talking about? Second is the criteria. First is object, second is criteria, third is the action. All right, which object, what is the criteria, and what action do we need to perform? These three things we need to define. All right, so if you go here, we basically are talking about this particular scenario, and we are talking about which object are we talking about here in this scenario? Read this and let me know. Which object are we talking about? Project object. All right, what is the criteria? What is the criteria? Criteria is hourly rate more than 100, greater than 100, right? That's the criteria. What's the action? Send an email to owner. Send email to project owner. Right? That's it. Okay, so initially till the time you get a little more confident with these workflow rules, you can actually break the workflow rule into these three small steps. Okay, so try to get the requirement and try to break it into these steps, and then it becomes easy. So first of all, we will select the object. Secondly, we'll put the criteria. Thirdly, we are gonna put the action. Okay, now there's one more thing to this before I get into defining it in Salesforce. There's one more thing. In the criteria, there are two types of criteria. One is a rule criteria, which is obviously hourly rate greater than 50, which is fine. There is one more criteria which is called evaluation criteria. Okay. So basically, the requirement that I have here is to send an email if the hourly rate for the project is more than $50, then it should send an email, correct? But there is one more important thing that we need to define here, which is evaluation criteria. When do you want this rule criteria to be evaluated? Okay, let me give you a small scenario and then we'll understand this. Let's say there's a project which I create. Okay, there's a project which I create, and this project has got hourly rate of $75. This project, let's say this is the project which I'm creating. Okay, let's say this is what I've created. Now when I save this record, according to my requirement, it is going to send an email, right? If I define a workflow rule on this, it's going to send an email because hourly rate is $130. After 1 or 2 days, I click on edit and then I make some changes here and there and again save the record. Save is happening, again the email will be sent, right? So every time if I save the record and every time if the email is sent, is that what we want? Do we want to send an email every time the record is being saved? Yes or no? Do I need to send an email every time the record is being saved? No. Most of you saying no, but we do not know. I mean, that depends on the client. Basically, that's ideally. Yeah. So you can have a requirement either ways. You might want to send email every time, or you might just want to send the email one time when the record was initially created. Correct? That completely depends on the client or the requirement. Okay. So this thing needs to be defined while we are defining the workflow rule. This point needs to be defined whether you want this workflow rule to be evaluated every time the record is being updated or only when the record is being created. Got it? So this is what we need to define in evaluation criteria. So in evaluation criteria, if you say that, okay, only evaluate the rule when a new record is being created, then it's going to evaluate it one time. If you say evaluate it every time the record is being updated, then it's going to evaluate it every time the rule, the record gets updated. It will check if hourly rate is more than 50. It's going to send an email. Then there will be multiple emails sent for the same record. All right. So that is it. All right. So now let's just go ahead and define the rule. Okay. Now we are good to start with defining the rule. So you just need to go to setup. Under setup, create, there's an option called workflow and approvals. In that you go and define workflow rules. Okay. Here we have, these tasks or actions that I told you. These 4 actions are mentioned here. We'll click on continue. Click on new rule. Object is project. Click on next. Rule name can be rule 1, 2, 3, whatever you want. Okay. See, I told you there are 2 things: evaluation criteria, rule criteria. Evaluation criteria is when the record is created and every time it's edited. And there is a third option here, created and anytime it's edited to subsequently meet criteria. So if there was a record which was earlier $40 and later on it was updated to $60, so this rule will get evaluated at that time also. Okay. So anytime the record is updated or edited to meet the criteria. So if it was not meeting the criteria before the edit and after edit it started meeting criteria, that logic we are defining here. Okay. So for me, created is fine. Rule criteria is pretty simple. That's hourly rate greater than 50. Okay. And then click on save and next. After this, you just have to go ahead and define the action. Here we just have to go ahead and define the action. Alright, so we have got immediate action and we have got time dependent action. Now it depends on you whether you want to send that email immediately or you want to send it after a bit of time delay. Alright, or depending on some time factor. So if you want to send it immediately, then the action needs to be defined here. Okay, so you can just go to add workflow action, say new email alert. Okay, and define the logic here. Okay, yeah, just put a description and unique name. Then you have to have an email template for that, automated email, because it's an automated email which is going to be sent. So for that I need an email template. Okay, I'm just going to use one of the existing email template, some email template I'm going to use. You can define your own email template also. So I am just using one of the existing ones. Now who's going to receive the email? Owner. Which object am I defining it on? Project, right? Oh, okay. There's a master detail relationship between project and client, right? So that's the reason why there is no project owner. So actually client owner is the owner. That's fine. Okay, so here if you select owner, it's going to allow you to select the client owner. Projects do not have owners because of master detail relationship. Okay, you can also put up to 5 email address who will be copied on the email that is being sent. All right, so if along with sending the email to the owner you want to copy someone, let's say you want to copy the VP of marketing here, you can put his email ID here. Okay, from email address can be selected. From currently we are using current user's email address. Okay, this current user's email address is used as the from email ID and click on save. Done. All right, so now in case you wanted to delay the email by some time, then you could have added time trigger here. You can click on add time trigger and say 1 day after rule trigger. Okay, now once you have defined the time trigger 1 day after the rule trigger, now inside this you can define another action. Let's say you want to send another email. First email is this, the second email which goes 1 day after the rule trigger, that can be defined under the same way. If you want to define more actions, let's say something which is going to happen 7 days after the rule trigger. So yeah, so see, we have got the option to define actions as per our time triggers. Okay, so that's all it is. Finally, once everything is ready, all that you have to do is you just have to click on done once you have defined all the actions, and you have to activate this. Till the time you do not activate, it's not gonna work. Okay, click on activate, click on OK. Now we have to just go ahead and okay, When you define a workflow rule for the first time on your org, it's going to ask you for a default workflow user. Who is a default workflow user? Basically, the default workflow user is the person who will be informed in case there is any problem with executing the workflow rule. Got it? So that's what a default workflow user is. So usually user with system admin privileges should be selected as a default workflow user. So fine, I'm just going to pick. It's just one time thing. First time when you're using creating a workflow rule, then it is going to ask. So this is basically your org wide default workflow rule user. Click on save. The workflow rule is active. Now let me just go ahead and create a project. Create a new project, client project. Okay, now it should send an email. Ideally, Bhaskaran should have received an email. Bhaskaran, please check and confirm if you have received an email. Alright, so that's what we're going to discuss today. Now let me know if anyone has a question or doubt here.